Hello. Welcome once again to Off the Shelf Books on Tour. I don't know if this is the 6th or the 7th season, but let's give it a try. This new book that I brought you is Never to Return, and it is a story of the USS Leopold. Right. And I've done a lot of books on the Coast Guard's involvement in the pre-war. And I didn't know that that territory between Greenland and the States was so very volatile. And this is the worst combat loss of that era. It was 1939, 40, 41
It's the worst combat loss in Coast Guard history from 1790 to present. It's the largest loss of life under combat. There was one other ship that was blown up in the Philippines, but it was loading munitions. It was an accidental explosion, and it killed 600 coasties.
Almost like the Maine.
Yeah, purely accidental.
Wow.
This is the largest loss in Coast Guard history.
And to understand it, for those who haven't had the privilege of reading the books that I've read, these merchant ships coming from England or going to England because they were under siege.
Mm-hmm.
And Roosevelt had declared them to be protected by us. So our ships would run guard duty in front, behind, and off. And early on it was merchants. But by now Coast Guard has got the duty, right? No.
Not quite.
Okay, so I'm telling you, there's so much information. And I'm a Navy brat. You would have thought I could, decipher it a little bit better. But to know how they had to protect the ships from the U-boats and protect one another to keep it straight.
Oh, yeah.
It's a good thing I wasn't aboard. But the way that the book came to be written was now, was it your daughter who found
it? Is my daughter, yeah.
So her name was Tori?
Tori, correct.
And she found a Fisher-Price tape recorder that had been used in 1986 to record these memories of what happened out there.
From her uncle, my brother, correct? For a term paper at Masconomet High School here in North Shore.
And what a journey that's taken you and your family on. Now, from start to finish, and I don't think you'll ever really be finished, how long to get it all together and get it published?
7 years.
And I'm surprised it didn't take you 10 or 17.
No, I'm a workaholic.
Right. But
I move fast.
But it's a never-ending story.
Oh, it's still ongoing.
Right. Every time you turn over a pebble,
I have another
3 more pools with the
another
ripples
investigation going on.
And you find someone else like you or your family who also lived through their loved one, but very seldom do they talk about it.
Out of all the interviews I did, virtually every individual, both from the Leopold, the rescue ship, the Joyce, and even our German counterparts that we got a hold of, never really discussed what happened.
No, I have found...
They lived with their nightmares every single day.
The guy that's there with a beer in his hand telling of his conquests usually didn't.
I have to tell you, my brother, rest his soul, was my dearest friend growing up. And a true...
How close were you in age?
Oh, I was 21 years his junior.
Oh, that's right. You were only 1 year old when
I wasn't even a year old when it happened.
Wow.
And everything I became, I owe to him, basically. And he never once mentioned the sinking, the name of his ship. The only reason I knew he was in the Coast Guard is he had a tattoo on his arm. I said, "What is that?" He said, "Oh, it's the Coast Guard emblem, Semper Paratus, on a little leaf up there." And I went, "Oh, you were in the Coast Guard?" "Yeah, during the war." I had to ask which war. As a 7 or 8 year old kid, I had no idea.
But I would imagine it must have been cathartic for him to have your daughter inquire and listen.
Oh, it was more than cathartic.
Yeah.
It was eye-opening. It really was.
To us on the outside, and it's fascinating. He signed on to see the world. He didn't want to see heaven, hell, and purgatory all in the same day.
No.
But he did, and he survived.
He was one of the lucky ones.
With 28. Now, how many were aboard the ship?
There were 201. 200 Coast Guardsmen and one Navy lieutenant who was hitching a ride to pick up his ship in Londonderry, Ireland. Got on the wrong boat.
I guess.
He didn't make it. 28 survived.
And there's a whole story in The Purple Heart.
Oh, that's a massive story unto
Yeah.
itself.
That I'm surprised to get it all in one book.
I almost was going to name the book, you know, In Search of the Purple Heart, because it started with my daughter. If it wasn't for her and the tape, and she became very aggressive with the U.S. Coast Guard in Washington. She got on a blog site with that the Coast Guard was running on the USS Leopold and Joyce, and got to meet several families, and accidentally researching the Leopold found that this fellow named Harry Dobby in 2010 just got the Purple Heart from 1944.
I find that
It took a while.
I
all right?
find that embarrassing.
It's
I
very
think that's
embarrassing.
unfair.
So she contacted Coast Guard headquarters in D.C. and placated this wonderful woman named Deneen Day in charge of awards and ceremonies. And it took about a year, but Deneen called and said, you know, we've researched the wreckage, and yes, you know, your uncle was in the North Atlantic for many hours, and yes, he does have shrapnel wounds in his legs and stuff, and we're going to award him the Purple Heart. And that occurred in 2011. With Admiral Neptune coming down and his entire entourage, who ended up writing the preface to the book. After that, I was on pretty much first-name basis with the entire United States Coast Guard. I personally know Admiral Neptune, Abel, Papp, Murphy. I could get down the line. I've shaken hands with all these gentlemen, and also, there are three historians, Brown, Price, and Thiessen. Brown is now retired, and Scott Price is now chief Coast Guard historian, and Bill Thiessen is down at Virginia Beach. Scott is at Washington headquarters. And I've had the opportunity to talk to them hundreds of times. I have not met either of them personally. They're never there when I'm in Washington. But they were wonderful people, particularly Bill Thiessen, who just connected me left, right, up, down, back, and forth. Any call that ever came in questioning those two ships, you got to talk to the colonel.
Now, did everybody get the medal?
Most of them, those who drowned at sea and froze to death, were awarded it in 44. The 7 in the hospital in Crievaw Hospital, Ireland, that couldn't come back immediately, also were awarded the Purple Heart. They lost 21, lost to whatever, World War II, millions of people involved. So we got it Dobby got it, and then my daughter got it from my brother. And then I got a call from Minnesota on Gail Fuller from his nephew, who said, you know, I've been trying to get the Purple Heart from my uncle. He's 88 years old. He's in a nursing home. And I said, gee, can I interview him? And I interviewed him, and that was a story unto itself. And I went back to Washington, and I called Miss Deneen Day, and I said, hey,
Got another one.
yeah, I found another survivor. I thought only Dobby was alive, and the long and the short of it is, it took her about 6 months, and they had a major ceremony at the nursing home. 400 military showed up, including generals, and a couple of Coast Guard captains flew in for it. And then I finished reading the Board of Inquiry, and any sunken ship has a Board of Inquiry to find out what happened. That was an 8-day trial at the Manhattan Naval Yard. And the final paragraph said the entire crew should be awarded the Purple Heart. Well, I'm not writing a book. I'm just a gadfly. I'm a pain in the ass to all these people down there. And I get on the phone and I said, Deneen, we got another issue. She said, now what? And I said, there are 21 that never got the Purple Heart. And she said, well, we don't even know who they are. And I said, but the Board of Inquiry says they shall be honored with the Purple Heart. She says, you want me to go back again, don't you? And I went, yeah. She said, do you have the AR, the article? And I said, yeah. And I gave her the series of numbers, and a month went by, nothing. 2 months went by. I called her and I said, what's going on? We can't find the article. I said, what do you mean you can't find the article? She said, we've been through all our records at headquarters. We can't find that reference. I said, go up to the second floor and see Bob Browning. He's got the Board of Inquiry in his file cabinet. She said, well, that won't do it. We have to see the reference article. And then about another month, she called me back. She said, we found it. And she said, we were looking in Coast Guard records. It's Navy. It's in the Navy archives. And we got it. And I've talked to the captain, and he's going ahead with Admiral Papp. They're going to plan to honor the ship with the Purple Heart. That occurred in 2013 at headquarters and Arlington National. So it was 2010, 2011, 2012, and 2013. And all I've been doing is making phone calls. And at that point, I said, you know, this is a story that needs to be told. If it got national recognition, it got a blurb on national news about the ship getting awarded the Purple Heart, I'm going, why not?
Well,
so here we are.
Thank you for your perseverance. Thank you for your service and for your service to your brother and those who couldn't speak for themselves.
Correct. Thank you.
Did you find anybody in the government that was embarrassed that they had been overlooked, or is it acceptable?
I wouldn't call it embarrassment. I think it was just, it got lost in the calamity of a world war. There's probably tens of thousands of people that deserve medals that never got them.
But how important it is, and I've seen stories of young people all across the country that find them in a thrift shop, find them in a home that, you know, has been abandoned, and they literally spend hours finding who it was awarded to.
Correct.
And getting it back to the family. And I hope that it always gets that respect, which of course goes back to the men who earned it.
It also goes back, the Purple Heart was developed by George Washington. So it has an extended history in our founding of our country.
Well, George would be proud of you.
I'm pretty proud of him. I think he did a great job in spite of all the politics today.
I wonder, you know, up with their heads, I think, if they're around today, but we're not going to go there.
Yeah.
What, you know, it's got so many facets. What part is the most illuminating to you? His life signing on and the reality, what life really was like, the actual going out and protecting the convoys and finding the rude awakening there. That was a surprise.
Well, you know, it was enlightening to me to find that these were kids.
Yep.
These were not grown men in their 30s and 40s that were manning these ships. If we look back, Barney Olson off of the USS Joyce was 16. I believe Armin Bergen on the Leopold was 16. Barney was not a citizen. Barney came over from Sweden with his father. He went to enlist in the Navy, and they said, but you don't have a birth certificate. How old are you? Well, I'm 18. Well, you got to come back with a birth certificate. He walked out of the enlistment office, and across the street there was a coastie going, they were picking up the Navy rejects, okay? And he said, come over. He said, how old are you? And he said, well, I'm 18. He said, you got a birth certificate? Yeah, I can bring it tomorrow. He was 16. He said, come in here and sign here. You're in the U.S. Coast Guard. Never brought back the birth certificate. 16-year-old kids. I mean, look around you at what 16-year-olds are doing today. They're protesting this, or they're smoking marijuana. And these kids were running off and defending their country at a very young age. Even the captain, as I look at Wilcox and Phillips, who drowned with the Leopold, these were both Coast Guard Academy grads. They graduated respectively, Phillips in 31 and I believe Wilcox in 36. Well, 1944, they graduated, they must have been 22, 30 years old, 31 years old, commanding a warship. Unheard of. You look out there today at our modern fleet, and these people are well into their late 40s, 50s, and even 60s commanding these vessels. I mean, you were
because they've had the luxury of growing up.
Well, we were at a country at war. Anybody who could turn on the engine and steer it, you're in charge. Go. And the interesting thing about the whole class of ship, the destroyer escort, really didn't come to be until 1943. We were defending convoys with destroyers, which are a little bit faster, a little bit bigger, and a little bit better armed than the destroyer escort. But this was a cheap version of the destroyer. You could make them for $1 million in those days, versus $5 million plus for a destroyer. And, you know, I'm in close contact with a lot of people that in Orange, Texas. In fact, I just got an article published there this last Saturday. And the ship was built there. 563 of this class were built. The Orange shipyard was turning out a destroyer escort and launching it every 30 days. We've been working on 128 since the 50s. A ship a month. That's how fast these people were turning it out. It was a small, sleepy Texas town on the Sabine River.
We thought they were all built in Bath, Maine.
Well, there were a dozen major shipyards, but Orange was probably, Consolidated Steel was the biggest in the country. And that town literally went from about 6,000 people to 65,000 people in a period of months.
In the war effort.
And the war effort was incredible.
My dad was aboard both the destroyer and the destroyer escorts, and I'm glad I didn't read the book until now.
No. Those ships really are something else. I've spent several nights on the USS Slater up in Albany, New York, which is the last in the world, totally restored. And I'll tell you, just sleeping in that bunk with the spring just about bouncing off your nose with nobody in the bunk above you, I can't imagine.
When somebody was there, yeah?
And you're on the North Atlantic route. You're not in the Pacific, you're not in the Caribbean. The seas are pretty rough.
Yeah, and the quarters are pretty tight.
They're very tight.
And there's not a lot of hot water and soap. And can you imagine they could smoke on board back then? That had to, you know, even more so. I used to visit him in the Navy Yard, and I was astounded that he was so comfortable. You know, and I was...
it's probably better than smelling the diesel fumes all the time.
This is true. This is true. Now, like we said, it's never ending. You find something new. I'm sure somebody's going to see this program, read the book. Do you get people that contact you after reading the book?
I've had contacts predominantly, well, I've gotten, you know, some reviews on Amazon and stuff. People are very slow to write reviews, I've noticed. And, you know, I'm not an author. That's not my profession. If it wasn't for Randy Pfeffer here, who is a superb author, the book probably would have never gotten to press. But, and that's an interesting story on how we met. But the long and the short of it is, yeah, I probably get 5 or 6 emails a week. Different reviews come in from different organizations. Tin Can Sailors just sent a review out, I think, 2 days ago. Very positive review. They called me up and said, "We're not going to make you wait. Here's the attachment." And we've just placed an order for books for our museum store. We love the story. It's got our highest rating.
Good. But not necessarily reviews, just information from other families that you hadn't contacted as if you had other people who...
I have heard from a few strangers who said, you know, I had a relative that served on the Leopold, you know, I never met him. Thank you for writing the book and the story and what actually happened that night.
And the ending. there's a lot of people who went to their grave never knowing what actually
Wilcox
happened.
never knew.
Well, and he stayed in contact with the crew, and they respect him.
They had reunions every year around the country. Even some of the U-boat people came to the reunions.
That's astounding.
Which is really astounding,
Yeah,
because
yeah.
they would shake hands and forgive and forget.
Wow. And how they can do that. I've seen that happen with the Japanese and American soldier. And they both sort of purse their lips.
Huh.
And then they extend the hand. And it was a different time in a different place.
Yes, it was.
And it was, we think today is frightening. That was even more.
We've seen nothing today like they saw in World War II.
No.
Nothing.
No.
As bad as it is today, it's nothing in comparison.
And the articulation, whether it was your words or the editor, at some point, I mean, I felt I was there grabbing for a piece of timber or something to hold on to.
We've had a lot of people say that. In fact, I think Mary Stewart, who was the live-in maid of Armin Bergen in his final years, said, I had Ann Winnie Olson, Barney Olson's wife, and they're in their late 80s, wrote me and said, I had no idea what these men suffered that evening. And I've been married to them for 55 years.
And what they went through, and the stock that they were to carry them through.
Right.
Never to return. We'll be back in a minute or two. Stay with us.
The book Never to Return is a series of what we like to feel are very short chapters that will totally intrigue you once you get by the historical part. And I want to read something about a place called Orange where this ship was built. Seaman Sparky Nersasian can't get the taste of ashes out of his mouth or the scent of coal dust from his nose, but he doesn't care. Almost 50 years later, he will laugh at the memory of this moment as he tells his niece Turi about standing on the cuffs of the biggest adventure in his life. He's fresh out of gunnery training in Norfolk, Virginia, fresh off a long, slow troop train from Virginia to Texas, with 7 Pullman cars plus a baggage car dedicated to the crew of the recently launched destroyer escort number 319, the USS Leopold. It has taken days for a series of fuming steam locomotives to drag Nersasian along with fellow gunners Charles Francis Bradley and Luke Bobbitt across the country. No matter, like a lot of men in this train who are soon to be shipmates, Nersasian has volunteered for this duty. He was working in a Coast Guard supply depot in Cleveland and has been so bored out of his mind that he put in for transfer to sea duty as a gunner. But what a strange beginning. It has been a hot trip to Texas, and with the windows open and the railway coaches, the smoke from the engines has been billowing over the coasties for what seems like a lifetime. Now here they are. They are off the train. They must find their ship. The troop train has stopped on a sharp curve, and a couple hundred sailors have poured out with sea bags slung over their shoulders. It's a sultry afternoon, hurricane season on the Gulf Coast. The sky is full of dark thunderheads. The smart fellows in the group are seeking shelter from the heat on the shady side of the Victorian Railroad station. All the men are looking around them at the flat, sunburnt landscape, the blocks and blocks of frame houses spreading in all directions. Many with asbestos shingles look to have been thrown up in the last year or so. Laundry droops in their clotheslines. The roads are dusty and clogged with traffic. Lots of trucks. The air smells of burnt metal, machine oil, and fresh paint. As U.S. Navy buses roll up alongside the station and stop, someone asks the obvious question, where's the ocean? It's a river, says a Marine gunnery sergeant who stepped off the lead bus. The Sabine River, Swabby. Welcome to Orange, Texas. It looks like the end of the world, says one of the guys with a New York accent. Could have been Darby or Olson. Get your sorry asses on the bus, says the Marine. Time and tide wait for no man.
So that was a rude awakening.
Yes, it was. It was one of Many rude awakenings. This is in the prologue, just to give you an idea of what was going on that evening. The ship is now in two pieces, held together by the deck. Everything was sliding toward the center of the ship. It was cut in half like you measured it. Down we went. Jerry is looking at me, but he doesn't know me. This is Sparky talking about his co-gunner. I don't know what happened, whether he got hit with a piece of metal or the shock of the hit, he banged his head on the scope. I put a life jacket on him anyways. It was the last time I saw him. The last time I saw him. As the bow begins to tear away from the rest of the ship, Sparky finds a life vest. He is on 4 or 5 layers of clothes, heavy gloves, buckled on hat, jacket, and wooden face mask. Remember, they were attacking the U-boat, and he was on the ready gun, so he was prepared for cold. That's how cold it was, and ice was hanging from the end of your nose. It was terrible. A Hershey bar would freeze in 3 minutes. The tape, and this is his recording, runs for another 40 minutes, laden with excruciating details about men sinking into the black, icy water, about overturned and overloaded life rafts, about the Joyce arriving to rescue the Leopold's men in the water, but streaming away because she thinks she is under attack by torpedoes. Hours pass, seas build. Men are screaming for Jesus and their mothers. Their limbs are swelling to twice their normal size. Before the Joyce returns, men become floating ice statues. Many just fall asleep, never to awaken. This man is in the water. He's 3 or 4 feet away. You can't help him. 3 feet to the left, I can reach out a hand and maybe save him. 3 feet to the right, he's a dead man. Out of the 200 men, less than 30 make it out.
It's hard. It's a good read. It's well written. I love the serendipity that it was supposed to be, the tape recording, the insurmountable interactions between you and the writer, you and your daughter, the fact that your brother recorded it as so many don't. Please read the book, Never to Return. And my guest has been Mr. Robert Nersasian. Nersasian. There you go, I told you. Thank you for being with us today. It's a good, historical, heart-rendering read. Thank you again for your service. Bye.
Bye-bye.